when a high-powered single-dad CEO accidentally enrolls his daughter in the wrong school, only to meet a young teacher who will change their lives forever. Aaron Blake didn't believe in mistakes. As the founder and CEO of a top tech firm, he orchestrated billion-dollar deals with meticulous attention. But parenting a child after loss, that wasn't something he could blueprint. Ever since the death of his wife a year ago, mornings had become mechanical. He ate toast without tasting it. His 7-year-old daughter, Ava, barely spoke, her large eyes hollow and her energy gone. That morning, Aaron rushed to catch up after an all-night pitch to overseas investors. His assistant handed him an envelope with Ava's updated school registration, but Aaron didn't check it. He just passed the address to his driver and continued checking his smartwatch. As Ava sat silently beside him in the back seat, he glanced at her reflection in the window. Her uniform was pristine, but her spirit was not. At the gates of what he thought was Belridge Academy, Ava stepped out obediently. He drove off, unaware that the towering iron gates he'd envisioned were nowhere to be found. Instead, a smaller, humbler building stood in its place, a school that would soon unravel everything he thought he knew about success, parenting, and love. Brook Hill Elementary wasn't on any of the lists Aaron trusted. It didn't boast elite alumni or top-tier test scores, but that morning it was exactly where Ava found herself. Inside its brick walls, decorated with faded murals and construction paper cutouts, a receptionist with warm eyes noticed the silent child looking lost and unsure. Without much fanfare, she knelt beside Ava and welcomed her with a kindness that felt both unfamiliar and needed. Miss Elena Hart was in the middle of prepping morning reading when Ava arrived at her classroom door. Elena was known for her gentle temperament, a woman who'd once trained as a trauma counselor before turning to teaching. She had a way of seeing children, not just with her eyes, but with a deeper kind of attention. She knelt down, introduced herself, and offered Ava a seat in the reading circle. To her surprise, Ava didn't resist. She sat silent, yes, but she sat. Elena didn't push. She'd seen that kind of silence before. It was the sound of a child carrying a storm inside. While other teachers might have tried to pull words from her, Elena offered Ava something else entirely. A sense that she didn't have to perform, didn't have to pretend. She just had to be. The first email tipped him off. "Thank you for registering Ava at Brook Hill," it read. Aaron's brow furrowed. Brook Hill? He clicked again, double-checking. The address matched. His stomach tightened. Within 30 minutes, Aaron was at the front office of the public school he had never intended his daughter to attend. His expensive suit and rigid posture immediately drew stares from staff and students alike. He was used to commanding boardrooms, not elementary hallways with construction paper dragons and juice spills on tile floors. "I want to speak to whoever let my daughter into this classroom," he said through clenched teeth. The receptionist tried to explain it was a simple clerical error. They had received the registration and no one questioned it. Elena Hart appeared calmly from the hallway. Her serene presence made an odd contrast to Aaron's force. "She's been safe, Mr. Blake," Elena said, holding her ground. "And she's been more than that. She's been seen." Aaron didn't want to hear it. He was ready to pull Ava out immediately. But something about Elena's unflinching gaze and calm confidence gave him pause. "If you're that concerned," she offered, "why don't you sit in for 10 minutes, just observe?" Against his instincts, he agreed. Aaron stepped quietly into the classroom, standing near the back wall like a skeptical investor visiting a startup. He folded his arms, keeping a clinical distance from the circle of children on the carpet. At the center, Ava sat cross-legged, her hands folded in her lap, expression still distant. Elena read from a book about loss. Simple language, soft themes. The kind of book Aaron would have dismissed as sentimental fluff. But then, something happened. Elena asked if anyone wanted to choose the next book. There was a pause. Then Ava's hand lifted slightly, fingers tentative. She pointed toward a book about stars and memories. It wasn't just the gesture that shook Aaron, it was the silence it broke. For months, Ava had only spoken in one-word responses. Now she was engaging, even if only with a small movement. Elena didn't celebrate it loudly or point it out. She just smiled, handed Ava the book, and let her sit beside her to turn the pages. Aaron watched, unsure how to feel. He came expecting incompetence, chaos, a reason to be angry. Instead, he saw his daughter, a glimmer of her at least, responding to something no therapist or private tutor had reached. He stayed longer than 10 minutes. That week, Aaron let Ava continue at Brook Hill. He told himself it was temporary, a way to avoid disrupting her again while they reviewed Belridge's options. But deep down he wanted to see what would happen. Each day Elena greeted Ava with the same gentle welcome. No pressure, no demands, just space. Ava still didn't talk much, but she began to draw. Not random doodles but vivid images of clouds, a house on a hill, sometimes a girl sitting beside a woman with brown hair and a yellow cardigan. One morning Elena asked softly, "Who's this?" Ava didn't speak at first. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely registered, "You." The word hit Elena like a wave. It was the first time Ava had spoken at school. She didn't make a fuss, just nodded, smiling in acknowledgement. When Aaron picked her up that day, Ava walked to him with a drawing in hand. It was of the classroom, herself and Miss Hart holding a book. She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. Later that night, Aaron sat on the edge of his bed looking at the picture. His heart ached, not just from grief, but from the sudden realization that maybe for the first time in a long time his daughter was beginning to breathe again. Late that evening, Aaron found himself wandering into the room he had kept locked since the funeral. It was Ava's old nursery-turned-bedroom, full of pastel tones, hand-painted walls, and untouched relics from a life paused in grief. Dust floated through the quiet still air like frozen time. On the dresser next to a jewelry box Ava's mother once adored, sat a framed photo of the three of them. They were standing on the front lawn of Belridge Academy, all dressed in white and navy, their smiles still alive in the glass. Aaron sat on the edge of Ava's small bed and gripped the frame. He had always believed that Belridge would be her path, just like it had been for her mother. The place was polished, structured, academically elite. He had envisioned a future where Ava would thrive among society's best, continuing the legacy of excellence they had planned as a family. But the reality was, since enrolling in Brookhill, his daughter was no longer a shell. She was starting to laugh again, to draw, to speak. A gut-wrenching question surfaced: had he been chasing a ghost? For the first time he wondered whether holding on to that dream was more about honoring the dead than nurturing the living. The next time Aaron visited Brookhill, he wasn't there to argue. Instead, he accepted an invitation to a fundraising meeting for the school's library. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored charcoal blazer, he looked every bit the executive. Elena greeted him at the teacher's lounge, her hair pulled into a loose braid, dressed in jeans and a red flannel button-up, effortlessly calm. They sat across from each other with mismatched coffee mugs in hand. Aaron wasn't used to this kind of environment. Informal, unpolished, real. But he listened. They talked about Ava first, how she was progressing, how she'd started initiating interaction during class time. Then the conversation turned personal. Elena shared how she had once worked with children dealing with trauma before switching to teaching. "Healing doesn't come from fixing," she said softly. "It comes from being with someone through the storm." Aaron, uncharacteristically open, shared how helpless he'd felt after his wife's death. "I tried to move on, work helped. But Ava," she stopped smiling, "and I didn't know what to do with that." Elena didn't offer cliches, she just nodded. Underneath the surface something had begun to shift, not just in Ava but between Aaron and Elena too. Over the following weeks, the unspoken connection between Aaron and Elena deepened. Not romantic just yet, but human, present. Meanwhile, Ava began to seek out Elena beyond classroom hours. She would linger during recess, asking her to read or braid her hair. Elena, always with gentle hands and patient words, responded with unwavering kindness. Aaron would sometimes arrive early to pick up Ava, watching from his car as his daughter laughed. Full-bellied, eyes lit up. It was a sight he hadn't seen in over a year. It caught in his throat every time. One day, Ava approached Elena holding a friendship bracelet she'd made during arts and crafts. "It's for you," she said, her voice shy but clear. When Aaron saw the bracelet on Elena's wrist later, he said nothing, but the weight of that gesture, small as it was, settled heavily in his chest. That night, Ava surprised him again. As he tucked her in, she whispered, "Can Miss Hart come to my birthday?" Aaron's heart clenched. His daughter was choosing who made her feel safe, loved, and understood. And in that moment, he understood something vital. Sometimes the most important family you have is the one you're brave enough to build yourself. Just when Aaron began to consider pulling Ava's enrollment from Belridge entirely, he received a formal call from the Elite Academy. A space had opened up. It was everything he'd originally wanted: access to top instructors, a future full of possibilities, status, legacy. He brought the offer up with Ava gently that evening over dinner. "Belridge has a spot," he said carefully. "You'd wear a new uniform. There'd be ballet and languages. It's a very good school." Ava froze. Then tears welled in her eyes and she looked down at her plate. Aaron didn't push. Instead, he called Elena to ask what she thought. She hesitated at first but then answered plainly, "Sometimes the right school isn't the one with the best statistics. It's the one that sees the child for who they are and who they're becoming." Aaron sat with that thought for hours. The next morning, instead of signing the transfer forms, he watched as Ava skipped down the path to her classroom at Brookhill. She turned to wave, The sun hit her face, she was smiling. He finally understood. It wasn't about prestige, it was about peace, and this school, this so-called mistake, was where she had finally found it. Just as things began to feel settled, Aaron's life was jolted again, this time by family. Margaret Stanton, his late wife's mother, arrived unannounced, regal in posture, cold in temperament, and dressed in a tailored cream coat. She surveyed Brook Hill Elementary like it was an old storage unit instead of a school. "This place," she scoffed, "is unfit for a child with her bloodline." Aaron had expected disapproval. He hadn't expected the vehemence. Margaret demanded a meeting. At his condo that evening, she launched into her argument. "She's slipping through your fingers, Aaron. That teacher is getting too close. Ava needs structure, not sentimental nonsense." Aaron clenched his jaw, defending the progress he'd seen. "She's smiling. She's speaking again. She's healing. She's bonding with a stranger," Margaret snapped. "Not her mother." The words hit like a slap. Aaron stood up, his voice firm. "Ava doesn't need to be reminded of what she's lost. She needs to be supported in what she's finding." But Margaret wasn't finished. "If you continue this path, I'll speak to my lawyers. I still have partial guardianship, and I won't watch my granddaughter be raised by a misguided schoolteacher." Aaron realized then this wasn't just about education. It was about control, and he was done surrendering it. The evening after Margaret's ultimatum hung heavy in Aaron's home. Ava, sensing tension without understanding the source, returned to her old habit of silence. She didn't eat much. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. She simply curled into her blanket and stared at the ceiling. Aaron sat alone in the living room, the city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about mergers or stock options. He was thinking about what it meant to be a father, not a provider or protector, but someone who saw his child not as a responsibility, but as a person. Margaret's words lingered like a bitter aftertaste. It was true. Legally she had influence, but morally, emotionally, that belonged to him and Ava. And he realized something else too. It wasn't just Ava who was growing attached to Elena. He was as well, not romantically, not yet, but profoundly. Elena had stepped into a role Aaron hadn't known how to fill. The emotional anchor, the consistent presence, the listener. He knew he had a choice to make. Keep peace with his late wife's family, or choose the life he saw his daughter finally building. The answer was becoming clearer every day. At school, Elena sensed the tension too. Ava had stopped smiling again. She clung to Elena during drop-offs, hesitated at lunchtime, and started drawing darker images: rain clouds, crooked trees, people walking away. Elena sat at her desk late one evening, staring at a drawing Ava had left behind. It showed a small girl between two towering adults, each pulling her in opposite directions. Her phone buzzed. A text from Aaron. "Can we talk?" They met at a quiet park that evening. Aaron looked tired, not in the physical sense, but worn down from internal battles. He shared Margaret's threats, her guardianship rights, and the pressure he was under. "I'm scared I'm putting Ava in the middle of something she shouldn't have to carry," he admitted. Elena's shoulders tensed. "And I'm afraid I've crossed a line," she said. "Maybe I've become too much of a presence." The silence between them stretched. "I don't want to make this harder for her," Elena added. "Or for you." Aaron looked at her with genuine pain in his eyes. "You've helped her heal. You didn't make this harder. You made it possible." But Elena didn't respond. That night she began writing a resignation letter. The next morning Elena left the letter on the principal's desk. It was brief but heartfelt. She cited personal reasons, emphasizing that she didn't want to disrupt the balance of a child's life by becoming a source of conflict. She didn't tell Ava. She couldn't bring herself to. That day in class she tried to be normal. She read their usual story, helped the kids with their art projects, and smiled through the ache. Ava, perceptive as always, noticed something was off. Her eyes followed Elena constantly. At pickup, Ava asked her, "You're not leaving, right?" Elena knelt beside her, stroking her hair. "No, sweetie. I'm just tired today. I'll see you tomorrow." But she wouldn't. By the time Aaron arrived, the resignation was already accepted. Elena didn't say goodbye. She couldn't face it. When Aaron learned what had happened, he was stunned. The resignation blindsided him. He demanded an explanation from the principal, but all he got was, "She felt it was best for Ava and for you." That night Ava cried harder than she had in months. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep. Aaron knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't the end of the story. He would find Elena. They needed her. The following weekend, Aaron canceled every meeting on his calendar. He wasn't going to waste time. With Ava in tow, he searched for Elena. He called the school. No answer. He tried colleagues. No one knew. It was as if she'd vanished. It was Ava who gave him the clue. She said she used to work with kids at a big place. with paint and music and stuff. A center. Aaron made calls, researched local community centers that offered trauma services, and finally found one that mentioned a new volunteer, Miss Hart. It was located in a quiet neighborhood in the East District, far from the polished downtown streets Aaron was used to. They arrived on a rainy afternoon. The building was modest, full of color and laughter, the sounds of children echoing through the halls. Inside, they spotted Elena leading a small art therapy session, sitting cross-legged on the floor with paint smudges on her hands. She looked up and her eyes met Ava's. Time stood still. Ava ran to her and threw her arms around her waist. "Why did you go?" Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you." Aaron stepped forward, his voice rough. "You're part of our story now, don't leave it." After a long, emotional conversation in a quiet room at the community center, everything came into focus. Elena admitted she resigned because she feared causing division in Ava's life. But Aaron argued that removing herself had caused the real pain. "You're not an obstacle," he said. "You're a bridge. You helped her walk out of grief." Elena wasn't sure what came next. She had given up her teaching position. She wasn't part of the school anymore. But Aaron had other plans. "You don't have to be her teacher to be in her life," he said gently. "Be her friend. Be her mentor. Be whatever you want to be." And then, with a pause that lingered, he added, "Be in mine too." Elena didn't respond with words. She simply nodded, and the silence was louder than any promise. When Ava rejoined them and saw them smiling, really smiling, she took both their hands in hers. "I want both of you," she said, not with desperation but with clarity. That night they went home together, not just as a father and daughter and not quite as a family yet, but as people who had chosen each other, not by accident, not by duty, but by love. Weeks passed and a new rhythm quietly settled into their lives. Elena was no longer Ava's teacher, but she was present in ways that mattered even more. She began visiting their home on weekends, helping with school projects, cooking simple meals together, sometimes staying late just to talk with Aaron on the balcony while Ava slept. Ava was changing too. Her drawings became more vibrant, her voice stronger. She laughed more often and no longer hesitated when talking about her mother. Instead of pretending the past didn't exist, she was learning to carry it gently. And Elena was part of that healing. Aaron, once so stiff and corporate, found himself softening. He worked fewer hours. He started joining school activities, volunteering at book fairs, attending assemblies. He began to live more in the moment, not as a man chasing perfection, but as a father learning to be present. One Saturday morning, Ava handed him a homemade card. Inside was a simple message, drawn in her careful handwriting. "Thank you for getting it wrong, because you got everything right." He looked up at her, misty-eyed, and he realized, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as errors. Of course, peace never stays untouched for long. Margaret returned unexpectedly, this time armed with legal paperwork and quiet determination. She had not forgiven Aaron's defiance. She was prepared to invoke her guardianship clause in Ava's custody agreement, citing emotional manipulation and inappropriate involvement by a non-relative. Aaron refused to be intimidated. But this time he didn't respond with anger. He responded with proof. He showed Margaret Ava's art, her journal entries, school reports documenting her progress, testimonials from the principal, counselors, even other parents who had noticed how much Ava had changed since Elena entered her life. Then he asked Margaret one question: "Is this really about Ava's future, or about your fear of being replaced?" The question stunned her. For the first time Margaret faltered, her voice wavered. "I lost my daughter," she whispered, "and now I don't know where I fit." Aaron looked at her, softened by her honesty. "Then let's figure that out together, but not by removing the one person who helped us both heal." There were no court dates, no battles. Margaret stayed for dinner that night. Ava invited Elena to join them. A new kind of family was starting to take root, one that welcomed healing, not hierarchy. Spring approached. With it came decisions. Aaron had received offers to relocate his company's headquarters, New York, Singapore, even Dubai. The move could mean expansion and profit. Old Aaron would have jumped at the chance. But new Aaron had a daughter who now smiled in the morning and hugged him before bed. He had a woman in his life who reminded him that peace was not something you bought, but something you built. He sat down with Ava one evening and asked her, "How would you feel if we moved somewhere far?" Her face dropped. "Would Miss Elena come too?" "No," he admitted. "She'd stay here." Ava's eyes welled with tears. Aaron didn't need more discussion. He knew his answer. The next day he declined every relocation offer. He'd stay, not because he couldn't leave, but because he didn't want to run from something this real. For the first time in years he was choosing life, not just legacy. The school year neared its end, and Brook Hill prepared for its annual graduation and family celebration. Though Ava was only finishing the first grade, her progress earned her a special award in resilience and growth. The auditorium was filled with clapping parents, handmade decorations, and the scent of cafeteria cookies. Ava stood nervously at the microphone. Her teacher nudged her gently, and she began to speak. At the beginning of the year, I didn't talk much. I was scared a lot, but someone helped me feel safe. She's not just my teacher, she's kind of my hero. Then, looking into the crowd at Elena, she said the words that melted every heart. Miss Elena, I want to call you Mom, if that's okay. Gasps, then silence. Elena covered her mouth in shock. Aaron stood behind Ava, placing his hands on her shoulders, nodding through tears. Elena stepped forward, knelt, and embraced Ava. That's more than okay, she whispered. That's the greatest honor I've ever had. Applause erupted. And just like that, a new family had officially begun. That summer, everything changed. And nothing did. Elena didn't move in right away, but she was there for every important moment. Aaron proposed, not with flash or extravagance, but with a simple gold ring and the words, "Thank you for loving us when we were broken." They married in a small ceremony, surrounded by Ava's drawings hanging like banners around the garden. Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes, while Ava threw wildflower petals and read a poem she'd written herself. Aaron still ran his company, but now he left his phone off during dinner. He coached Ava's soccer games and sat through dance recitals, always with Elena at his side. And Brook Hill, it stayed exactly as it was. Humble, warm, and full of heart. Aaron often thought back to the mistake, the mix-up in addresses that started it all. A single slip of paper had rerouted their lives forever. But now he understood. Sometimes the path you never intended is the one that leads you home. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that love can come from the most unexpected places, and that family is about connection, not perfection, then please subscribe for more stories like this. Every story is a journey, and we'd love to share the next one with you. Subscribe now and never miss a miracle.